Welcome to Insomnia Archive. Tonight's story is not loud. It does not rage or scream. It waits. It hums beneath the skin. And when you settle into it, it will settle into you. This is not a story of war or glory or kings. It is not a tale of invention or empire. It is a story of a room with no windows, no voice, no sleep. A room meant not just to contain, but to erase. You've heard of solitary confinement. You may have seen it in a film or read about it in a dark corner of a history book. But this episode isn't about prison cells with iron bars. Not entirely. This story is about silence, how it was used, how it was worshipped, and how it was weaponized. Because long before solitary confinement became a modern punishment, silence was something sacred, and then something cruel. From the cloisters of medieval monasteries to the oubliettes of stone castles, from the quiet beds of 19th century asylums to the sterile cement of modern isolation blocks, humans have long believed that taking someone, sound, their connection, their voice, could purify them, could correct them, could control them. Tonight, we're going to explore how. So lie back, let the noise of your world fall away, and let's step into the long, echoing corridors of human silence. Let us begin. Silence was once a virtue, not a punishment. In the early centuries of Christian monasticism, silence was seen as a ladder to the divine. Speech was worldly, earthly, distracting, and to quiet the tongue was to quiet the soul. But there's a difference between choosing silence and being silenced. Let's begin in a stone monastery. It's the year 1237. You are a lay brother, not fully ordained, not yet trusted. You rise before the sun, your breath visible in the winter air of your cell. There are no personal possessions, no mirrors, no comfort. You don't speak, not unless commanded. You communicate with gestures, you chant in Latin you barely understand, and you fear the chapter house because that's where punishments are handed down. In some monasteries, if you break the vow of silence, you're flogged. In others, you're placed in seclusion, not for minutes, not for hours, but for days, weeks, longer. You're given bread and water through a small opening in the door. You're not permitted to write. You're not permitted to hear Mass. You are alone with your thoughts and with the belief that this isolation will cleanse you. It is not always framed as cruelty. Some abbots say it is a kindness, a chance to reflect, to return to God, to purge the noise from the soul. But to many, it felt like erasure, because silence over time doesn't feel pure. It feels hollow. Imagine sitting in a darkened cell, candle burned out, time unmeasurable. You count the stones on the wall. You recite prayers until the words lose meaning. There were those who sought this silence. Anchorites, religious recluses who were sealed into cells for life, voluntarily. They were given a final blessing, as if already dead, and then the door was closed. They lived the rest of their lives in a small chamber attached to a church, with one window to receive communion and food, and another to speak spiritual advice to the community. To choose that life was to choose burial before death, but others had no choice. They were locked away not for holiness, but for deviation, for questions, for mistakes. And in those cells, silence became a tool of correction. No violence, no blood. Just the soft, endless pressure of being forgotten. We often think of punishment as noise screams, chains, shouting guards. But here it was the absence that hurt. And what's more, those who enforced it believed they were doing something good. That silence healed. That isolation brought clarity. But for many, it did the opposite. The silence grew teeth, and it bit down. In the next segment, we'll go deeper, underground, into places where silence wasn't sacred, it was suffocating. Let's continue. Let's descend now from the cold, echoing stone of monasteries to the darker, damper silence beneath castles, to a space that was never meant to be seen. A place not marked with a sign, a place built for forgetting, the oubliette. From the French oubliette, meaning to forget, the oubliette was a vertical shaft, sometimes carved into natural rock, sometimes hidden beneath a trapdoor in a castle floor. A hole, no bed, no torch, no door to open. Just a narrow drop into a lightless chamber. You didn't enter it, you were placed into it, lowered or dropped through the opening and left there. It is the 14th century. You're accused of something. Maybe treason, maybe theft. Maybe you refused to kneel when you should have. Maybe someone simply wanted you gone. You don't get a trial. You don't get a cellmate. You're taken under cover of night, your wrists bound. A hood over your head. You don't know where you're being led. And then the rope is removed, and the ground is gone. Your body hits the dirt below. You feel your ankle twist. You cry out. But the sound doesn't echo, because the space is too tight. The walls absorb everything, and the trapdoor closes. You are alone in the oubliette. Some of these shafts were wide enough to crouch. Others weren't. Some held prisoners for hours. Others until the bones became part of the floor. This wasn't punishment through pain. It was punishment through absence. Absence of time, of sound, of contact. There were no torches, no windows, no guards to curse at. Just the gradual awareness that you were no longer in the world. And worse, no one knew you were there. The oubliette was not always used for formal executions. It was used for removals, political problems, religious dissenters, even disgraced noblemen. To be thrown into an oubliette was to be unpersoned. We often think of medieval torture as theatrical racks, Iron Maiden's branding, but the most devastating tools were often the quietest. Castles like Leap Castle in Ireland or Schillen in Switzerland have recorded remnants of oubliettes, many discovered centuries later, still containing the bones of the nameless. In some cases, the oubliette wasn't even vertical. It was a small room, sealed with no door, bricked up with the person still alive inside. Some cried, some prayed, some scratched the walls. All fell silent. What does a mind do in a place like that? Deprived of light, of motion, of sequence, your brain begins to falter. Time ceases to flow. Sleep becomes impossible. Wakefulness becomes torture. Even when oubliettes weren't fatal, they left permanent marks. Some prisoners were pulled out after days and could no longer speak properly. Others wept uncontrollably in the presence of light. There was no need to break bones, only to close a door. This was silence not as virtue, but as violence. And still there were those who believed it was necessary to control, to cleanse, to command respect. In the oubliette, silence did not bring you closer to God. It didn't offer reflection. It simply hollowed you out and made you easy to forget. Let's leave the stone behind. Let's walk upward. We're not done yet, because even after oubliettes fell out of favor, the idea of silence as control didn't. In the next segment, we'll enter the 19th century, into the asylums, workhouses, and dark rooms of a supposedly more enlightened age, where silence didn't just punish the body, it punished the soul. By the 19th century, the belief in silence as virtue had not disappeared. It had evolved. From stone cells and oubliettes to polished corridors and institutional beds, silence now wore a cleaner face. It was still cold, still brutal, but now it was justified by science, by medicine, by moral reform. Let us begin in a place of healing, or at least a place that claimed to be. Welcome to the Victorian asylum. It is 1857. You are a patient, a term preferred over lunatic, though the records will still list you that way. You were brought here not in chains, but by carriage, perhaps with a doctor, or a clergyman, or husband. You may have said too little, or too much. You may have grieved for too long. You may have dreamed aloud, and so you're here. The asylum is large, well-built, gated. It smells of soap and chalk. The walls are clean, but inside, the orderlies walk with quiet shoes. And the rules are unspoken. There are no screams. Not because no one is in pain, but because screaming is punished. Disobedience is punished. Noise is punished. There are padded rooms. Not everywhere, but enough to matter. Rooms with nothing inside but a bed fixed to the floor, a tiny barred window near the ceiling, and walls that drink up every sound. They call them quiet rooms. They say it helps the patients calm down, prevent injury, but the truth? They are cells. Just brighter. You're placed there if you disobey. If you cry too loudly, if you challenge the staff, if you simply can't stop speaking. And when the door shuts, just like in the oubliette, it's the absence that hurts most. No voices, no clocks, no music. No day or night. Sometimes they leave you there for an hour, sometimes longer, and if you weep, no one hears. Because even outside the room, silence is enforced. In the common wards, patients are expected to sit quietly in rows. Needlework, reading, sitting. Conversation is discouraged. You may be surrounded by people, but no one touches. No one speaks freely. The silence becomes a second skin, and it seeps into your memory. You stop remembering the days. You stop remembering yourself. This was called moral treatment. It was seen as humane, better than chains, better than beatings. But in many ways, it simply replaced physical pain with a subtler kind of erasure. Not violence, just stillness, not screams. Just quiet compliance, and this didn't stop at the asylum gates. Workhouses meant for the destitute used the same methods. Silence was discipline. When you entered a workhouse, you were stripped, bathed, and given a uniform. You were separated from your family. You were told where to sleep, where to eat, and when to work. But more than anything, you were told to stay quiet. Meals were eaten in silence. Work was done in silence. Rest was had in silence. If you spoke, you were punished. Sometimes with extra labor, sometimes with isolation, sometimes with reduced rations. The silence wasn't about peace. It was about control. To make you compliant, small, predictable, and for many it worked. The quiet became a void. They stopped asking questions. They stopped looking others in the eye. And inside their heads, the silence grew. Some broke under it. Others learned to live within it. But either way, it shaped them, and it shaped us. Because even now, when we talk about discipline, about composure, about control, we often still associate silence with virtue, stillness with goodness. But behind those tidy walls and polished floors, the silence was not healing. It was hollowing. Let's move now to the last door, to a silence not imposed from above, but chosen. Next, we'll step into the modern era, where isolation is no longer punishment, but self-inflicted, where silence isn't a sentence, but a coping strategy. So listen carefully. In the 21st century, we like to think we've left the oubliette, the cloister, and the silent ward behind. There are no hoods pulled over our heads, no trapdoors to swallow us whole. And yet isolation has not disappeared. It has simply changed shape. Imagine a small apartment, curtains drawn, the glow of a screen, the only light in the room. Days blur into nights. Conversations happen through text bubbles. Meals are eaten alone, perhaps standing in the kitchen. Outside, the world moves, but in here, it's still. No guards keep you inside. No locks bar the door. This is a voluntary cell. For some, it's a choice born of comfort, the quiet of home, the safety of solitude. For others, it's the slow, creeping effect of disconnection. Friends move away. Work becomes removed. Errands are handled by delivery. Weeks pass without another voice in the room. We don't call it punishment, but the human mind often can't tell the difference. Loneliness has measurable effects. Higher stress hormones, weaker immune systems, shorter lifespans. The silence we choose can sometimes begin to feel like a silence imposed. The body reacts as though banished from the tribe, a lingering survival instinct, whispering that isolation is dangerous. And yet, unlike the prisoners of the past, we carry our own oubliettes in our pockets. A phone can both connect and contain us. The scroll of endless updates becomes a wall between us and the immediate world. Even our public spaces have become quieter. Self-checkouts replace cashiers. Earbuds replace casual greetings. Whole days can pass without eye contact. But there is a difference worth noting. Unlike the monastic cell or the asylum's dark room, modern isolation can be broken by choice. The door is often unlocked. The challenge is remembering to walk through it. This segment is not meant to scold, but to reflect. Silence can still be sacred, healing, restorative when chosen and balanced. But left unchecked, it can hollow us in ways eerily similar to the past. We may not hear the trapdoor close above us, but the effect on the heart can be the same. The history of isolation cells reminds us that humans are not built for endless solitude. We are built for connection, even if it is quiet connection. And if history has one clear message here, it is this: silence shapes us. It can sharpen the mind, or it can starve it. And so, as we close this story, think of your own room. The walls, patterns of speech, and your own quiet. Is your silence feeding you, or is it slowly erasing you? Until next story, good night and sleep well.